Hey everyone, this is Skepticy. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Standing, broadcasting to you from the heavily fortified recording compound above Mount Moose Jaw. These are my other hosts.
I'm Dell. I don't know why I always wave. No one can see me, but I always wave. I'm Dell.
These go on YouTube too now. So hello. I'm Cory. Yeah.
I haven't watched any of the YouTube ones yet.
There's only one that actually shows all of us as people. Every other one is just emojis with a background or bitmojis with a background.
Okay.
So
what's new in your guys' lives?
Well, what's new in life?
Or what's new in the world, I guess?
I've really unplugged from politics, not on purpose. It just I'm not constantly terrified anymore. So I'm getting back into my old sources of news that I had kind of dropped because I just couldn't handle listening to NPR report on Donald Trump it was all normal and fine, and not be able to say he was lying and a criminal.
Yeah.
But now I'm getting back more into my normal flow of news. Okay, I would like to listen to my local NPR for a half hour in the morning and hear about the news, and I don't need to obsessively check Twitter every hour in case there's a crisis, and a little bit more controlled. I'm certainly still paying a ton of attention to politics, but it's just a little bit more sedated than it was, instead of a panic.
Yeah, I haven't been doing as much doom watching and stuff either. Kind of disconnected a little bit. Started a novel. It's pretty interesting. It's it's not really a novel. I guess it's a biography called Stolen Lives. The lady's name is Malika Ofker, and I just started it, but it's really fascinating. She was adopted by a king, basically, and then her biological father attempted to overthrow the king, or did overthrow the king, maybe even killed him. And as a result, her and her sister and her mom were sent to harsh prisons, after harsh prison for 20 years or something, and then she finally got free. So.
Wow. Where was this?
In Morocco.
Interesting.
Oh. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's, I haven't been paying attention to current issues, but some lighthearted reading on social injustices around the world, right. I guess. Yeah.
Well, that kind of stuff is, it can be very informative, I feel like. It can add a lot of depth to our understanding of current issues sometimes.
Well, even just the parts I've gotten into it, I mean, it was written 20 years ago, so I don't know, it must have happened 10 or 15 years prior to that, 20. But some of the ways that these kings are treated and I don't know if demand to be treated or just are over the years. They talk about them having harems of 40 women and things like this, and people running to pick up the dung from their horses, as they're going to church and stuff. And
does sound like a king, doesn't it?
Right. People clamoring to get their cotton swabs and stuff like this. And I'm just what?
This is why we shouldn't have kings.
I was about to say, so what you're saying is rich people have always been awful.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And people have always recognized it and kind of said, what's going on here? And so, I had no idea how just bizarre all of it was, I guess.
I have no idea where I'm getting this piece of information, and unfortunately, I can't quite place the exact time. But I read something once about, I think it was a Wikipedia rabbit hole, so, I think it was a Wikipedia rabbit hole I fell down when watching the show The Last Kingdom, which I named my new dog after one of the characters because I enjoyed it a lot, which was set in like the 1100s in England. And, but that kings and queens used to, like, if you look at the fashions of like the 11s, 12s, 1300s in Europe among royalty, like they are absolutely bizarre looking, like just weird stuff, like, shaving their eyebrows and their head and like those giant like accordion collars and stuff. And there was a point, and I think it may have been like around the time of the French Revolution, when royalty switched from wanting to look as inhuman and as unlike any of their subjects as possible to wanting to just be a human just like you. So like they went through a lot of work to make themselves like, I am literally a different species. Like, you are nothing like me. We have nothing in common. I want to look as bizarre and ridiculous as possible and nothing like you, and have totally crazy fashion. And then there was a point at which they suddenly found it in their best interest to look just like you and I, if they could. Just a little better,
Right after they started sending the rich and the royalty to the guillotines, eh?
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah. They wanted to look like they actually went outside for a while, And I've heard that too, that the shift has gone from the kind of wealthy people not wanting to look like they've ever been outside. So, powdering the skin and bleaching the hair. And then now to that vacation in the Bahamas in the sun all the time look, right?
Right, because you have time to be in the sun if you're
Right,
rich.
yeah.
Just like you have time to work out. You have time to work out if you are privileged, right?
I try not to be too judgmental of various people, right? But I was driving somebody they were my passenger in my Uber. And when they shook my hand, this was like last year, as they got out, they had the softest hands I've ever felt in my entire life. And I could not believe, like, I thought, this person has never worked. How are your hands this soft?
Right.
Which might be a judgmental, unfair assessment, but that was my instinct.
Yeah.
There's definitely some people that go callus free their whole lives, and
Yeah.
The entire fashion industry, like you were talking about, is kind of a strange thing, as this article I was reading was something about how it was the height of fashion was kind of brought on to separate new wealth from the old standing powerful wealth. So if you weren't up on the latest cuff size or sleeve length or whatever, then that weekend, what was fashionable, then you were automatically disgustingly newly wealthy. And
that could explain the level, to some degree, the level of disdain that working class people often have for the fashion industry, because it's like an elitist type thing. And
well, the only good fashion is band merchandise and slogan T-shirts anyway. So,
right.
Right. So
blue jeans and slogan T-shirts are nothing. That's
right. Yeah. The only.
So you two are probably going to think this is ridiculous, but like I basically couldn't wear a band T-shirt until I was like 23 because I was so paranoid of getting shit tested.
Oh, is that right?
I was like, yeah, like I couldn't do. I think I wore a Pink Floyd shirt like one time in high school, and some guy argued with me about them for like 15 minutes, and I was just like, after that, I was just terrified. Fan. I was terrified of wearing a band T-shirt in public ever. And then when I got to like 23, I started a little bit, and guess what? Nobody cared.
Yeah.
And
Some
now
shitty
it's
teenager.
like a staple of my wardrobe, right?
Right. I think a good rule is try to know at least 3 songs that the band be able to name 3 songs.
Well, I think he was really mad that I didn't like, I think it was a Pink Floyd shirt, and he was really mad that I didn't like Dark Side of the Moon as much as him or something. I don't know. I mean, which I liked it, but apparently not enough or something.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying you didn't like the album and know it off by heart or anything, but some people get pretty picky when it comes to band facts, for sure. They can't be outdone.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I was a band nerd, so, like, those particular people, I think, can be even worse sometimes.
Right.
But, yeah, as I'm wearing a band t-shirt tonight.
Everybody's toxic about their fandom.
Yeah.
I suppose.
I used to, years ago, I used to say like, well, I mean, so-and-so likes Iron Maiden. They can't be a bad person.
Right.
Which is clearly not right?
I think that the Star Wars and Star Trek fandoms have really broke me of that habit of thinking that people could have listened to liked the thing without understanding the moral behind it. Or just generally, like, a lot of rock music in general, of watching people just be shocked that these rock musicians have liberal politics. And it's like, yeah, did you listen to their point? Like, they wore 6-inch heels and tons of makeup as men to their shows. Like, did you think they were conservative? I'm confused what you thought was happening here.
Like the Trump rally video where they're moshing to Rage Against the Machine.
Right.
Okay, that had to be a Poe, right? Like, those people had to know that it was going to, like, trigger the libs, right? They had to.
One would think, yeah.
I don't know. I've encountered quite a few legitimate conservatives who thought Rage Against the Machine was like on their side of things. I don't know how they figure. I guess you don't think about it, right? You just think it's angry music and the machine they're raging against is whatever I hate. And
I'm definitely a lyrics person. Like, I memorize lyrics really easily. I pay attention to lyrics a lot. Like, shitty lyrics can totally turn me off of something. And I just kind of assumed that people paid attention to that. But, like, my husband, he's just like, no, I've never known what that song said. No. Have no idea what they're saying. Never cared. Not going to remember it, even though you've told it to me now. So, like,
just like the way it
I
sounds.
guess if there are people who listen to music without paying attention to what they're saying. So presumably those people could get the wrong impression fairly easily.
Those same people used to give me shit because the heavy metal that I listened to, they couldn't understand the lyrics, so that wasn't good either. Even though the music they listened to, they didn't pay attention to the lyrics.
Oh God. My boyfriend that I dated in high school was like into like Cannibal Corpse and that kind of stuff, like the real like shock stuff where he would like try to play it over the speakers in the band room, but then he'd have to like show people papers with the lyrics printed out that were about eating babies.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably didn't go over well, huh?
I think people just rolled their eyes for the most
Usually,
part. So.
yeah. Usually that's how it goes.
It was when he went to a Gwar concert that I was like, wow, are you two familiar with Gwar and or Gwar's
Very much,
concerts?
yeah.
Yeah. I was like, wow,
I mourned the death of Ilias Orungus for sure.
Yeah.
I never have had the privilege of going to a Gwar show, but I've heard they're memorable to say the least. Prepare to get sprayed with stuff.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. You're supposed to wear a white shirt so that you can bring it home with all the stains of the bodily fluids.
Yeah, that all by itself would be enough to put me off. I've never liked the idea of getting sprayed with anything.
No, why? Why would you? I don't get it.
Yeah, fair
Anyway,
enough.
my early introduction to, and I was Like, literally, I didn't even drink alcohol in high school. Like, I was, like, the biggest nerd, and it wasn't that I was, like, opposed. I just, like, no one ever invited me to a single party that had alcohol in it, ever, in my entire, like, high school. I don't know. I just didn't have friends the way other people do or something. I don't know. So I was, like, the world's biggest goodie. He was, like, a huge pothead that smoked pot, like, every single day, and I didn't even know that smell was pot. I was just like, okay.
All right then.
Nice.
So it was
Perfect.
a great relationship for 2 years. I mean, the first year where I had no idea what was happening. I think it was good for me though, because like I could be such a stuck-up prude right now if I had not dated him for 2 years. So like I'm totally cool with it. I think it was very good for me.
Yeah, that's good.
Decent. I had the other high school experience, from what I can remember anyway, from what I was awake for in the daytime.
I was told by my boyfriend that the secret was the wake and bake. That was how to get yourself motivated for school in the morning.
Right.
That's how you do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Another thing that works good for getting motivated to go to school is paying for it, too. That'll light a fire.
Oh, yeah, his parents paid for his college, and he failed out after the first semester. So he forgot to go to his finals. He dumped
That'll do
me,
it.
by the way. So,
No judgment.
yeah, after he failed out of college. And, yeah.
I can't say a damn thing. I got booted from college because I decided that paying student loans was worth just getting drunk all the time. And so
That's about the theory that I took, too. Yeah, definitely. I can't get mad at the student loan machine for my debt. I earned it.
yeah,
Well, the Colonial Hotel in Saskatoon earned it, but
somebody did. Yeah, somebody got it.
Right.
Yeah, I had about a semester where I had like the wild college experience, like hit up a lot of parties, made a lot of friends. And I was like, well, that was fun, but I only needed a semester. I was fine after that. I got what I needed.
You got it out of your system a little bit.
It wasn't really worth the hangovers at that point.
Well, see, that's the mistake. You got to stay drunk the whole time.
That only works for a while, is all I'll comment on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
anyway.
Eventually, you take something and you don't wake up for 48 hours and everybody starts worrying. And then you...
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. Come on, people. This is a Thursday.
Yeah. We're not making light of addiction. That's right.
Thursday was the big party night at my college, so that was the night you were supposed to get trashed. But
Thursday
anyway,
night.
does anybody have any topics today other than reliving our youth?
Yeah, just
Not really.
chit chat. There, I guess, Elliot Page came out as transgender. That was a good news story. That came
Yeah, that's super cool. Although there appears to be a bit of confusion because, so a little trans 101, some non-binary people consider themselves trans.
Yes.
Some non-binary people don't consider themselves trans. They're just like, I'm non-binary, but like, that's like, I'm not, for whatever reason, they just like don't want it. Some people... Like, I often hear people say, like, I'm not going to do any medical stuff, so I don't consider myself trans, or, like, I'm fine keeping my name, so I'm not going to say I'm trans. Like, but it totally runs the gamut, right? So Elliot came out and said, I'm trans, and my pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And all the newspaper articles said, Elliot comes out as non-binary transgender. Elliot never actually said if they're a trans man or... non-binary, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, they just said that. Yeah,
okay.
Here are my pronouns.
So a bunch of people who just read like Elliot's thing, I saw a bunch of stuff that being like, now that Elliot's a trans man, will he keep all his roles as a woman that he's currently in? And then people were like, they're not a trans man, they're non-binary. And then I was like, wait. And so it's actually not clear at this point, I think.
Right. Yeah.
All the news articles said non-binary, and I feel like maybe they would have corrected it if that was all wrong.
Right.
I don't know.
Even this one in Variety that I actually linked, like I'm looking at, says that Page uses he, him, and they, them pronouns and describes himself as transgender and non-binary, meaning that his gender identity is neither man nor woman. But did he say that?
But that's not actually what the statement says. The statement doesn't say non-binary anywhere.
So,
yeah, I know. So I'm like,
media should definitely be respecting the pronouns.
They are. They've been doing so good.
Actually,
really.
they have been really good.
There are a few people that are upset that Elliot's dead name is ever mentioned in the articles, but a lot of other trans folks are really excited because it seems like almost every news site has been super good about pronouns and using the current name and like only mentioning it once so that people know who you're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So they were saying like compare it to when Caitlyn Jenner came out like only like 5 or 6 years ago, and like it was all dead name all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like all wrong pronouns all the time. So like I think it's been quite good, personally.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like actually, the article that I read never mentioned their dead name at all, and I was like, wow. Like that's a milestone almost by itself. Like if articles go like in mainstream media are doing this correctly, then I mean that seems like a hump that had to get gotten over.
Right. And like
cool.
it's actually pretty recent that like the AP and those type of places, the style guides have come out with clear guidelines of what people are supposed to be doing, because a lot of like journalistic outlets like have to follow AP guidelines. So if AP guidelines told them that they couldn't do like certain things, even if somebody asked for it, like there was AP guidelines that said you couldn't use they, them for a long time.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even use they as a plural. You had to use like if you didn't know, you had to use he or she. Right? So like my mom was a trained journalist, so she always got on my case in papers. Like you have to say he or she. You can't say they when you're talking about just like a human and you don't know who that human would be. You can't say like when the person enters the room, they'll sit down at the desk. You have to say when the person enters the room, he or she will sit down at the desk.
Oh.
You know,
I seem to remember that in some of the writing courses myself that
Yeah, having a mother that's a trained journalist review all your papers before you submit them in school will drill a lot of these things into you. So, also, numbers 10 and below should be written out. Numbers 11 and above should be written as the number. So, that's another one I see all the time that my head is like, you're not supposed to do that.
right.
Yeah. I still do it. Like
I definitely follow that one. Like I definitely still follow that one. Sometimes
I even with 100, I'll write the words 100 instead of typing the number. So that's something that I don't know where I got the habit of that, but that's one
I still double space after a period, which I understand you don't have to do anymore. Old typewriter stuff.
Between that and the bifocals, Eric, you're really revealing your age tonight.
I know. Get this. The one class that I got like positive feedback sent home in was like operating a manual typewriter. I got student of the month in typing class.
I think that my mom tried to train me on the double space thing, and at a certain point, I was just like, fuck it. And I just stopped. Because, like, that one didn't stick. It was too much work. I don't know. Nobody cared. Like, I remember people caring at some point, and, like, people just quit caring at a certain point. So I was like, all right, enough of that. Seemed like bullshit anyway. It's a bad rule.
It's, yeah,
I suppose.
it's a dumb rule.
It gives you maybe, a 16th extra of a page on a long essay, I suppose.
But in a
That's a good
tweet,
point.
it just screws you.
Right. You only got the 180 to work with. Yeah. I fired up my manual typewriter the other day. It's kind of fun to work it because so much effort goes into making each letter, right? Like I just kind of take it for
hand
granted.
strength.
Strong fingers.
Yeah, like you actually need strong fingers to like thwack this button down, right? And it's kind of cool, and it's made me realize like I just take
It's like
for
when
granted,
your power
I guess.
steering goes out and you're like,
Yep.
shit, this used to be that hard for people.
That is exactly how it is. Like I wouldn't have had the finger strength to be like a secretary in the 1930s or whatever. There's no way I could have done it. And then in other news of things being from thousands of years ago being brought back, have any of you heard about the worms in Siberia that what we call here permafrost is receding and things are starting to thaw, I guess. So something like 42,000-year-old hematodes have been thawed, and a couple
That'd
of them
be really
apparently,
exciting if it wasn't depressing.
Yeah, right. The way it happened, but a couple of them are apparently moving around and things. I know very little about science comparatively, but I think this should be groundbreaking news of some sort or another. It smacks too heavily of Jurassic Park to not be paid attention to.
Isn't that like one of those comic book or alien movie tropes where like the freezing in the north, it frees something that's going to destroy all of mankind if we don't do something about it?
Yeah. The frozen thing comes back to life.
Yeah. Whatever wiped out the dinosaurs.
It's just
Aliens.
worms for the time being.
Aliens. Aliens.
Definitely
Yeah.
aliens.
That's right.
Anyway, well, do you want me to talk about my thing?
Let's talk about your
I could
thing.
go over my thing.
Sure.
So this was in one of my podcast fan groups on Facebook that somebody posted this. And it's actually a person with autism, and I'm autistic myself, which I did not find out until I was an adult, probably because it's severely underdiagnosed in female kids. And especially because, like, I think when I was growing up, there was still a sense that, like, you couldn't be autistic if you were, like, getting good grades and doing decently in society. Like, it was thought, it wasn't really thought of as the such a broad spectrum that it is today. But for me, it was, like, really empowering and actually a big relief to find that out, because it was, like, I just had a lot of things that I really thought that I was failing at because I wasn't trying hard enough. And it was really nice to be able to be like, no, my brain is actually wired differently. And that's the reason that it's not making any sense to me. Like the stuff that you're saying, particularly about interpersonal interactions. Like it always felt like I was colorblind and other people were trying to describe colors to me. And they're like, dude, it's so easy to tell red and green apart. What is your problem? And I was just like, I'm trying so hard and I have no idea how you guys can tell red and green apart because I'm colorblind. And then finding out you're colorblind and that's why you can't tell red and green apart is helpful. You can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Should have known that before. Somebody should have helped.
Right, because it was definitely a situation where it was just like people kept telling me like, yeah, you were being really awkward or like you were being really rude. And I would be like, okay, so like what did I do that was rude? And they would be like, well, just pay more attention to your surroundings. And I would be like, I am literally paying attention to every possible thing to the point that I am exhausted after a 1-hour meeting. So like, how could I pay attention any harder? I don't get it.
That may even be part of the problem.
Right.
Thank you for that description. That was a good
Yeah, so for me it was really empowering, but then the problem is once you're like, wow, my brain is wired differently, sometimes you can get a little stuck on being like, yeah, my brain is wired the right way and you guys are the idiots actually. which not very many people veer into. And like, there's also a place for like, you know, if your entire group has been marginalized for a very long time, there is space for you to be like, I am proud of being autistic and I think some autistic traits are awesome. Yep. But like, you know, I am also aware that I probably shouldn't veer too hard into self-worship either. But anyway, I just wanted to
come on.
throw that out there and say that I'm autistic. I've probably known for about 5 years now, although I actually suspected, like, when I was, like, in middle school age, and my parents swear that this never happened, but I, like, talked to them about it and was like, I think that maybe I'm autistic and should get evaluated. They swear that they have no recollection of that, but whatever. Honestly, I don't know if they actually believe me to this day, but that's neither here nor there, really. That's their deal. I'm not really that concerned about it because for me, it's just really helpful for me to maybe find healthier ways to deal with things that I struggle with instead of like finding things that I can just be like, all right, just don't worry about it, and finding other things that are like, I'm having trouble with this, and learning from other people with autism how they deal with it is actually a lot more helpful than reading like general self-help about those things, if that makes sense.
You're able to kind of pinpoint specific behaviors, I guess. And
yeah, because it's like sometimes the reason I'm struggling to do a thing is like the exact opposite of why neurotypical people struggle to do that thing. So like when I read the advice and the advice tells me to do one thing, like it's literally the opposite of what would help me, you know? So it's just like it's a much more helpful paradigm for me to use when thinking about myself, which is nice. But the point I wanted to get to was, so someone posted in this, the Philosophers in Space podcast fan group, a blog article from a autistic person. So on the internet, there is a lot of activism among autistic people, like pro-autism activism on the internet. Like, I think autistic people in general do really a lot better with internet communication. So there's just like a really strong bastion of them on the internet doing a lot of activism and really just trying to change the paradigm around like curing autism or like just viewing it as mental retardation and instead viewing it as like a good type of, it's called neurodiversity. Like the same reason diversity is valuable in other areas is a reason why neurodiversity is valuable as well for humanity, you know? Yeah. So this article is from a person who I think is kind of an activist in that region. And they were reviewing a journal article in the Journal of Neuroscience, which is a very prominent, it appears to be a very prominent neuroscience journal. And it looks like it might be a preprint because when I looked at the original article, it actually says that the authors have been made aware of concerns and are working to address them before the final version of this article is published. But basically, this was a study in which they asked some people, autistic people and neurotypical people, would you give money to this charity that does good things? And they asked them in public and they asked them in private. And then they said, would you give money to this charity that does terrible things? It was like killing animals. If we gave you $50 to support this charity that kills animals, would you take that $50 and support the charity or not? And they did that in public and in private, and then they did it with different amounts of money. Would you do it if we gave you $100? Would we do it if we gave you $200, right? I can't actually see the dollar figures because I don't have access to the full article myself, just the summary, but that's the basic idea of what they did. Okay. And what they found out was that autistic people and neurotypical people, for the most part, were pretty willing to give to charity, like a good charity. And in public, they were not willing to take money to support the bad charity, the one that was killing animals. But in private, autistic people held to the principle and didn't take the money. And neurotypical people took the money. In private, they were like, yeah, kill the animals, give me the money.
Wow.
So that's interesting, right? And they also did functional MRIs on this, looking at different regions of the brain, specifically the right tempoparietal junction. And in the neurotypical people, there was a lot of activity in that part of the brain. And in the autistic people, there wasn't much activity in that part of the brain at all. So the authors, here's where that's all just interesting, right?
Right, yeah.
But here's where the problem comes in. The authors of the study framed that as autistic people being immoral because they won't act in their own self-interest enough.
Oh, man.
So
and that they clearly have deficits. That autistic people must have deficits in their moral reasoning because they held to their principles even in private.
Yeah, I have serious issues with the drawing of a conclusion like that. Like they would be immoral for not drawing the same conclusions as non-autistic people or neurotypicals, I guess. Like obviously I'm going to land on a certain side of this, but like who honestly thinks that we should be happy or that it's the right answer that people will do bad things in private? Yeah. How is that? How is not being ethically consistent immoral? Or how is being ethically consistent immoral? Like I think that they it seems like a switching of the what should be.
And I can imagine scenarios in which like moral rigidity becomes a barrier, okay? Like I feel like we can all understand why sometimes like people who refuse to vote for Biden because, he's just as bad as the other guy, right? Like I think we all get why there are points at which being like really morally rigid could be a problem.
Yes.
And even if it's not like a problem that leads you to do things like vote for Jill Stein, it may be a problem that leads you to like have trouble holding a job because you feel like anytime someone deviates from the process slightly, you have to report it to your boss. Okay? Like that's not actually conducive to holding a job, right? You have to kind of learn when to let things go a little bit, right?
Yeah.
My roommate Gwen had been doing a thing that annoyed me for a few, and it just happened to become a habit, and I just ignored it for a while, and then eventually I was like, oh my God, stop doing that, right? And she goes, anytime I do something that bothers you, you should tell me. And I was like, no, I shouldn't. That is definitely not true. Like, that is definitely not how having roommates works. You definitely should not tell them.
Do you actually want me to always tell you?
So, I totally understand why, having in autism, having to put things into black and white is can be a burden. That can be a challenge. So I totally get it. But trying to frame this particular thing as you won't take $200 to kill animals. How is that? It just seems like the study authors were really twisting themselves in loops because they were afraid of the conclusion that autistic people were actually doing better in some respect.
There is.
Right.
Yeah.
What framework are you using to judge the responses by? Yes. It kind of reminds me of early intelligence tests, so-called, intelligence quotients tests, whereby one of the questions was, if you found a wallet laying on the street, would you, and then they gave you options take the money, take it and find the rightful owner, or just leave it sitting there. And, supposedly the best answer was, well, I would take it and pick it up and find the rightful owner and stuff. And they found that depending what neighborhood people were from, they would answer quite often just leave it there, right? Because if you're in the wrong neighborhood and someone finds you with somebody else's wallet, bad things could happen, whereas other people who didn't live in those places were more confident to pick it up and find the owner, and just various things like that, where that had absolutely
that they
nothing
wouldn't
to
get in trouble just for having it, right?
Right, yeah, and has nothing to do with intelligence. Just like this test, is rigged so that caring about animals or caring about others all the time is viewed as not putting on your own oxygen mask, or however that's looked at.
Right. And like I said, I can imagine a scenario that you could come up with where you could show that this rigidity is a problem, but this is not that scenario, not even close. And it's also interesting that they said just because this one area of the brain showed less activity must mean that autistic people have a deficit in the types of things that region.
Yeah, that seems like a stretch.
Because we know that sometimes, if you have a deficit, it means one part of your brain is actually working really hard. Or sometimes if you have a deficit, it means that part of the brain isn't working when it should be. Just because something's doing a lot of work or not doing a lot of work doesn't actually tell you if it should be doing a lot of work or if it's actually bad that it's working. You know what I mean? I feel like these authors, had they seen the opposite conclusion, they would have been like, well, autistic people's brains are working overtime, so they must be really bad at this and have to work really hard to get, you know what I mean? I feel like you could spin that any way you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It seems...
Anyway, so we can link to this in the show notes, and the journal, or the review in this blog has a lot more detail that I can't really verify because I can't see the whole article because it's behind a paywall. But I am going to be a little bit interested to see if I can remember to go back and see what criticism they got and what they changed. Because it doesn't have any details about, in the journal where it says it's under review, it doesn't have any details about what kind of criticism, was there something wrong with their statistical model, or was it you guys are clearly being ridiculous? I don't know. Yes. So this is the conclusion. This is a quote from the article.
Okay.
Here we show that ASD individuals, that's autism spectrum disorder, are more inflexible when following a moral rule, even though an immoral action would benefit themselves, and suffer an undue concern about their ill-gotten gains. These findings deepen our understanding of the neurobiological roots that underlie this atypical moral behavior in ASD patients.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavily slanted.
I can't help but wonder, don't we want people to feel concern about their ill-gotten gains? Don't we want people to be less selfish?
Right. Just because, nobody's looking,
what the hell is this conclusion?
I know.
You shouldn't have two personalities, one for when people are watching you or not.
Right.
That's we should try to avoid.
Or is the conclusion here that everybody who feels moral consistency is a virtue? Are we all somewhere on the autism spectrum?
Well, that's one of the...
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, that's one of the possible takeaways. So autism is one of those things that people are like, look, we vaccinate more and now there's more autism, right? And because autism is one of those things that's heavily influenced by if you're looking for it or not, right? And what are your criteria when you're looking for it? So people are like, white kids are more likely to be autistic. No, white kids are more likely to get screened for autism. Rich kids are more likely to be autistic. No, rich kids are way more likely, if they're doing a little bit bad in school, to get a screening with their pediatrician. Yeah. If poor kids are doing badly in school, they're much less likely to get that kind of stuff, right? There's been a whole thing about the criteria for autism in female... in general, females get socialized much, much harder to conform to certain, verbal behaviors and like social patterns that they get punished for really harshly if they don't follow, whereas boys don't have the same set of social enforcement. Like, it's obviously there's roles that are enforced, but they're just a little different, you know? And so girls often get missed in autism screenings when they're children because they do a really good job. Like, they just follow scripts. Like, they watch TV shows and they just follow scripts of what they're supposed to say to people. And so they do a much better job masking, like, their awkwardness, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of stuff about autism that's like, I think now that we have the internet and now that we have some of these like autistic people speaking for themselves, there are people who never got screened who are suddenly finding out they have a lot in common with us. You know what I mean?
Right. And how did you kind of, I guess, what were your first steps when you kind of started thinking, well, maybe I should be screened for this? You know, is it something you discussed with a family doctor or maybe researched online a little bit? Or?
Mostly just my therapist. Like, I definitely had just thought more and more as I saw stuff online, but basically it was just confirmed by my therapist. So that's pretty much where I went with it. And my therapist, I did not know this when I started seeing him, but my therapist is also autistic, which I feel like really helps
Wow.
us like communicate on the same level, you know? That's
pretty huge.
I've been to a couple different therapists, and it was never like terrible, but definitely found someone like that I actually click with now and feel like I've made a lot of progress with. And I think that's one of the reasons, because he's also queer and autistic. So, but he also lives in an area where there's like tons and tons of underserved queer folks, because he's in a rural area in Minnesota. So he's like so busy all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, considering you're in rural Minnesota, you know, I was pretty lucky to find that doctor for sure.
Yeah. And like, there's a lot more therapists that like try to like just work with like the LGBT community and stuff, because the issues are like so interconnected. You know what I mean? It's really hard for people that haven't experienced some of that to connect sometimes with people that aren't LGBT. And one of the things that I know is a huge issue right now is that people of color feel the same way. Like, they feel like it's really hard for white therapists to, a lot of times it's really hard for white therapists to get their issues and what's bothering them and the best way to attack it, because there's just not enough in common. But
there's only so much you can get from a book or a course or
right. And understanding, like, I think it goes back to what you were saying about the IQ test. And some of that stuff is just like culturally, sometimes like, say, standing up for yourself in the way that a white therapist might suggest is a great idea, maybe is not a great idea for a black woman at a majority white company or something, right? Like, she might feel like that's really actually going to stress her out more to behave in that way, right? Maybe the answer from a black therapist who has a little bit better handle on it might be something different, like possibly something wildly different. So, or like they feel like they spend so much of the appointment just explaining like, this is how my experience is. You don't understand. As a black woman in this room, this is what it's going to be like. And like, you can skip all that if you're already talking to a black woman, right?
Right.
So the problem is, I feel like there is this blossoming of LGBT folks that are interested in mental health. And because of the inequalities in our society, there are like very few therapists of color or mental health professionals of color available at all. Like, it's just this really unmet need right now, which is unfortunate.
People are a lot more likely to open up to an addictions counselor that has gone through addictions themselves, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I'm sure like that's the problem too. And I'm sure like, you know, white therapists would love to help as many people as they can, and it's not supposed to be an insult to them.
themselves. No.
But yeah, so that's like, I just like, it's one of those things where it's like the LGBT community, I feel like is really doing, I'm sure people would still tell you there's a shortage, but like, I feel like it's really blooming right now with tons of options that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. And I feel like I don't see that happening for people of color. And I wish that they could experience the same thing, because that would probably be awesome for them.
Yeah. Hopefully
Anyways, that's
works.
pretty much all I had to say about my topic. I'll put it in the notes. Maybe I'll follow up if they ever make any changes or corrections. I think if I log into my work computer, I think I might be able to get access to this journal, because my company has subscriptions to like everything in the universe, and I don't think anyone cares what I'm Googling on my machine. So I might be able to see the whole thing at some point. But I did not feel like doing that on a Sunday. So.
Right.
That's fair.
I don't want to risk that someone would see me on Skype and decide to reach out to me, because I'm technically on call most of the time. But even if I'm not the primary person that's on call, if I'm on Skype, people will decide that I'm the one that should help them instead of them calling the cell phone of the person that they're supposed to try first. So.
Good call.
Yeah, you don't want to open yourself up to that. Yeah.
Especially not this time of year. The time between Thanksgiving and Christmas in my industry is just like the worst. So I don't want to do it.
Fair enough.
All right, Cory, did you have a thing that you
really.
researched? No? Okay. I didn't mean to call you out.
Right.
No, it's I am curious if you have any thoughts on the cabinet picks from Joe Biden. I know that there seems to be a lot of pushback on some of them from the left, because they are it's often framed as though this is a person who fits an identity, but is not a person who fits a philosophy or is less neoliberal or less of a centrist because of that.
I haven't been watching it super closely. I did see, I think it was it Department of Homeland Security? He appointed someone that had a really bad history with deportations.
Okay.
To be related in that role somehow. I saw that like a while ago, so I can't remember. And I think she might have been, it was a woman, I think she might have actually possibly been Hispanic, which would go along with what you were saying, but people were really unhappy about that. I have been following his Secretary of Agriculture talk.
Oh.
Interestingly, he's considering Heidi Heitkamp, who was the Democratic senator from North Dakota.
Right?
Yep. Or who served only for the one term, I believe, before losing, because it was always kind of a wild thing that she, as a Democrat, won North Dakota. But the other candidate who people seem to be way more excited about is Marcia Fudge, who is a black woman from the South somewhere. No, not the South. I thought it was Marcia Fudge from Ohio, which that would be super cool to see a black woman as Secretary of Agriculture. I don't know if she's ever said anything that I majorly disagree with. So, so that would be cool. I mean, I would be okay with Heidi Heitkamp too, just because being from the Midwest, it's always nice to have someone that is also from the Midwest. So I would feel like they would have a good idea where I was coming from. But those are really my only thoughts on Biden's cabinet.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know Neera Tanden is the one that a lot of people have spoken about. Apparently she said something about how she actually was in favor of the idea that we take oil from countries that, or that the U.S., not Canada, that the U.S. take oil from countries that they had intervened on behalf of. So So there was a lot of pushback about that. I'm not entirely sure on the details of it, but
Yeah. I feel like if Kevin was here, he would be able to tell us
I'm sure he
all
would.
about it.
Right, yeah.
yes.
And what exactly does intervene mean, you know? Yeah.
I mean, you know how the U.S. intervenes, right?
Right. Nice car. I'm going to intervene for a little while. You can walk now.
It might be my car.
Right. Yeah.
Here, I might have found this deportation thing.
Okay.
Maybe. No, I didn't. I thought it was. Sorry. Yeah, I think it was their role in the Obama. I think it was a role in the Obama administration that this woman had that involved a lot of pushing for increased deportations, which Obama, of course, had a horrible. People remember the Dreamers Act as kind of one of the more recent things he did, but he actually deported more people than any other president. He actually had a horrible record with deportations.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah.
So,
And,
yeah.
Bruce
We're not
Reed,
happy.
apparently, who is a quote notorious deficit hawk. So that could spell austerity measures, which is troubling. I guess on some level, even though Biden is better than Trump, leftists and people on the progressive side of things would have, we all knew that this wasn't going to be perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was Joe Biden presidency means there's still so much work to be done. It's just not. It's just not fascism.
Right.
So,
yeah, lesser of a couple evils.
I heard a really good The Daily by New York Times. They did a really good breakdown of who was it? His the Secretary of State that Joe Biden is picking, whose name I'm at absolute loss. I think it's Blinken or something. And he sounds like the kind of person who's very pro U.S. intervention because of, in his history, his grandfather was actually saved during World War II by U.S. troops who showed up wherever he was, being held or was in trouble. And so he grew up this Blinken. I'm sure it's Blinken.
It is. It's Antony Blinken.
Okay. Yeah. So he grew up hearing stories about how great the U.S. was internationally and really internalized those ideas. And he sounds like a person who genuinely believes that the U.S. is a force for good in the world, as opposed to many of us who think that the empire is really not a force for good sometimes. But
yeah, I found the person for Cecilia Munoz. She was actually just named to the transition team, I guess, not specifically a post yet. But yeah, so she was involved in the deportations for the Obama administration. She was actually for a lot of the groups that were working on immigration policy for Obama, she was the only Hispanic person there. And people were upset that was basically just tokenism because she was often the one pushing for the most harsh policies,
yeah.
And took a lot of flack for it. And people felt like she was actually a shield for criticism to shield Obama from actually getting criticism for his administration's policy on it. Instead of, so really kind of enabling it in a couple different ways that people were unhappy with. So I think she's just on the transition team for Biden. I don't know what she's doing on the transition team, I guess. But yeah, because, people thought that Biden had done a good job during the campaign of distancing himself from that part of Obama's policies, and taking a better stance on immigration, especially with the refugee stuff, a lot of at least posturing towards wanting to have a better refugee program and stuff. But
Yeah, especially like when his focus so much of the campaign was like about Trump's children in cages situation. And he really he painted himself as a much more progressive in the sense of immigration, at least.
Right. And yeah, so people did not take it to be a good signal when he appointed this person as his.
Yeah.
I watched a bit of the ICE documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
It was about as alarming as you would expect it to be, but you know, they're knocking on this door, and the guy's talking about, or the lady actually is talking about, you know, oh, they say we tear children from the arms of their parents, and we don't actually do that, and that's just hype. And then the very next frame, they're tearing this guy away as his baby's crying, you know, and then they're hauling him back off to Mexico, and it's just like, you know. So I think the people who made the film kind of were quick to point out the basic lies, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little worried because whenever I see something like that on Netflix, I'm like, okay, is this pro cop? You know, like
I try not to rely too heavily on Netflix documentaries as my sources of information.
Yeah.
But as far as sources of information goes, I've been going pretty much back to the Stone Age for that one. But as you notice, I haven't been. I've kind of taken your stance on that. I wiped my brow when Trump officially lost, and I've just been kind of.
Yeah.
Hoping for the best.
And I know like people have been like afraid, like, oh, now wishy-washy liberals are going to go back to not giving a shit, you know? And like, I'm definitely like still way more interested in politics and involved than the average person. It's just that I was in a bad place where I couldn't go an hour without worrying about it. And now I can just think about it for like an hour a day. And that's, you know what I mean? Like I'm still up to date. I'm still active. I still care. I'm just not in a literal crisis at all times, you know?
Yeah. Like I had actually like even decided that if Trump won again, then I was done listening to news. Like I have and continue to immerse myself in current events and news for hours and hours and hours and hours every day. And I have a mental limit. And if Trump won again, I would have been broken. That would have been past my limit. And so I understand like people had their limit at different spots, right? And if you can relax enough now to pay attention in other ways and to, you know, you don't have to be in that, like you say, crisis mode all the time.
Stay away from the comment section.
Yes.
Stay
oh my
away
God.
From the comment section. Doesn't matter how innocent the topic. Stay out of them.
I like
to go in and duke it out sometimes. Just sometimes.
Sometimes I've created accounts just so I could do that.
Yeah, I'm particularly bad on anything local.
I'm the wrong person to take advice from, for sure.
If it's a Regina or Saskatchewan-based article on COVID lately, then I'm in there fighting with those anti-maskers and.
See,
right.
And my friend Amy from Secular Soup, like she also likes to go into her local news comment sections, and like I want to stay away from anything like local to me because that's like too upsetting, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of like I was getting a lot of my news filtered through things like, you know, comedy podcasts and stuff the last year because it was just like I couldn't handle it unless people were able to literally say, you know, this is insane. You know, I just couldn't handle listening to the NPR people have to be chill and just report on it like it was a regular presidential speech. I just couldn't do it, you know? I needed to be hearing it from other people that were reminding me that I wasn't losing my mind.
The number of times I've screamed at my phone because the New York Times was, you know, presenting some cop as the authority on systemic racism.
Oh, God.
Right.
I'm sure that I've had some mini strokes throughout the year because of rage. Like,
on that note, little while back was the 30th anniversary or whatever. I don't want to use that. That sounds like something fun. Been 30 years since the Neil Stonechild incident where he was, it was a police brutality thing.
Starlight
here in
Tours.
Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Yeah, they took him. They took a 17-year-old, I think he was, Aboriginal guy out and left him in the cold to freeze, basically. And it's a well documented case or whatever. And of course, the 2 police officers who were involved had to go to the unemployment office.
They did not go to jail. Yeah.
No, they had to come to the unemployment office with the rest of us. Right, that was their big punishment for murder.
Yep.
But anyhow, they. So I'm like, okay, well, who are these 2 officers? So I don't even remember their names now, but I found their names and I'm like, what are the chances this guy has a Facebook profile? Go on the Facebook profile and it's all full of like Indigenous rights stuff. And I think there was even some stuff about people freezing. And I just kind of went like, wow, that's just the most blatant, complete, like false 180. Either that or like, you're coming to the end of your days and you're starting to think that maybe you should
make amends in some way.
Right, and going the online route. But I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Like that he would have the balls, I guess, to do that. Right.
There's a there's the podcast Commons is doing a series on the police in Canada, and one of their recent episodes was on the Starlight Tours and the ongoing practice of driving Indigenous young Indigenous men and women too out to the outskirts of a city and leaving them in the cold to walk home, where sometimes they freeze to death. It's still ongoing, and in some places, like I think Thunder Bay is currently having some issues with it, though they are having many issues these days with racism in their police and just citizenry. I think it was last year or the year before they had a case where somebody, an Indigenous woman, was walking down the side of a road and somebody threw something at her and hit her.
Trailer hitch.
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
a trailer
that's
hitch.
not something.
Yes.
That's like.
No, that's
It's like a concussion.
That's intent to kill.
Yeah. Well,
that's intent to kill.
Yeah, and I believe I can't recall, Eric, maybe you remember, did she die or did she just have severe brain damage?
I think she's dead. I think she died.
Yeah, I thought so.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And they're talking about reducing his charges or something like that.
Right, yeah, because that came up fairly recently in the news too. His defense was real. I can't remember it exactly, but his defense was really ridiculous. Like it was like that somehow he was not complicit in a hate crime, despite the fact that he threw this hitch at an Indigenous woman and killed her. They wanted to take the hate crime segment out of it, I think, because he said, yeah, I can't remember what he said, but
yeah, they felt like they couldn't. Yeah, they were trying to make the argument that it wasn't motivated by bias, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's always going to be tough to prove, right? Because they even tried to take that out of, I forget the name of the gentleman that was killed while jogging by those folks trying to make a citizen's arrest.
Right,
I mean, they have like text messages between them using racial slurs and like them using racial slurs as they shot him. And they're like, it wasn't racially motivated. And it's like,
why do you have to make this about race? Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
think,
like it's always really hard to prove. And people are always going to put up, how you can't prove that it was because I hated him. I just like using the word.
My defendant was simply out throwing trailer hitches. She happened to get in the way.
Apparently when he threw it and he saw that it hit her, like a witness or somebody said, he yelled, "I got one."
Oh, Jesus.
So I don't know how you can say that wasn't a hate crime at that point. Like, I don't know.
That's awful.
Well, hopefully people will be tried as they should, you know.
Hopefully.
Justice is all we can hope for.
Yeah, I never heard about that one. I'm actually a little surprised because, like, Thunder Bay is, like, the closest Canadian city to me. I mean, it's still, like, 6 hours away driving, but, you know.
Yeah, they've had, there's actually an entire podcast about Thunder Bay, and it kind of goes into some detail about some very conspicuous missing persons of Indigenous descent. So.
Okay. Well, it'd be worth looking into.
Yeah, it's a really, really good podcast.
Someday I'll get to Canada. Maybe not Thunder Bay, though.
Right. There are other parts.
Probably more exciting than Thunder Bay.
One or two, yeah.
Yeah. I had to laugh. I think it was last year. A friend of mine was in, I think he was in Estevan or somewhere here in Saskatchewan. And I was in Alberta at the time in the Rockies. And he said, I'm in Canada. Do you want to have coffee? And I'm kind of right. I'm like, there's kind of a broad expanse. I can't guarantee there I'll be in a half hour. I'll be there in a half hour or anything. I'll do my best. Yeah.
Too funny. All right. Well,
that's about all I got for tonight, guys.
All right.
Coming up on an hour, so.
All right. So you can find our stuff at skeptarchy.com. Follow us on Twitter at skeptarchypod. Our email is skeptarchy@gmail.com. And you can find me at Hardcore Skeptic. And Dell at More Cowbell.
Nice. I'm very impressed.
And Eric still doesn't have Twitter.
Well, I do, but I keep being a buffoon about it. But you can find me on Eric Ray Standing on Facebook. And I say that, and then I get these friend requests, and I wonder who people are. So I should probably start accepting some of those.
Yeah, I just went through some the other day, and I was like, if we have no friends in common, do I think you found me through a podcast? I'm not sure.
Or are you just a creep?
Right. Yeah. The problems of being a wildly successful billionaire podcast.
Wildly successful.
That we face, you know, but we do it for the people.
So much fame and fortune.
All right, guys. Once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Have a good night.
You too.
See you soon.